Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Works Committee. We have general agenda and consent agenda. Let me just indicate for anyone who thought that there was a public hearing this evening, this does not have a public hearing component at this meeting. There will be a public comment period at the City Council meeting as usual next Monday. And there are about half of the specific public meeting and hearing opportunities with regard to the proposed changes to the TransAid fees yet to come. Mr. Barnes, do you have the schedule for the remaining TransAid public comment opportunities with you?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Well, just for anyone who is watching, would you note those before we go into today's agenda? Can you give those, just step up to the podium if you would, please?
Yeah, there's several public meetings left. I think there are, five, or how many? 3 more public meetings that remain, and you can access that information by going on our website.
If you don't have it sort of at your fingertip right now, can you get that information, and we'll just note that for public information during the report? Okay. So we'll, at this point, then, thank you very much. We'll go on with the agenda as planned. We do have, as usual, the general agenda and the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are taken as one item and approved altogether, except for anything that may be pulled for individual discussion. Are there any of the consent agenda items that a council member would like to have pulled for discussion?
3 and 4.
3 and 4. Anything else? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval of the balance C1, C2, and C5?
So moved.
All right. Discussion? If not, those in favor of approving C1, C2, and C5, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's approved unanimously, and we will go then, please, to item C3.
Item C3, resolution authorizing temporary street art downtown.
And Mr. Turner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a request that we occasionally get from a fundraising volunteer organization to put little icons or decals on the city streets in the downtown area in order to raise awareness of their event. We've received that request from this organization. The markings will be temporary, and they'll be responsible for removing them at the end of the fundraising event.
Mr. Clark?
So my understanding is there's 10 of these that are going on sidewalks.
Correct.
Right. And are the merchants whose sidewalks are going in front of aware of this, that they're getting these things?
Usually don't notify the adjacent merchants.
They don't know they're going to
happy
appear.
to let them know.
And do we I know on the banners that we put up and other things like that, where we have banners on city property, do we receive any funding, any remediation for those?
For banners, yes.
Yes.
But this type of thing, no, sir.
Okay, so have we done this before?
Oh, yes, several times.
Okay. And how often do we end up doing this?
Once every 3 to 5 years, we'll get a request like
3 to
that.
5 years?
Yeah.
Okay. That answers my questions. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions on this? Motion to approve?
Okay, well, I'd make a motion to approve this item.
Second. Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, no? All right, that's approved. Thank you. Item C4, please.
Item C4, resolution approving city participation in a drainage project across private property at 1716 Grace Street, located in the Southwest Ward.
Mr. Turner?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as you may recall, the city has a policy for participating in the cost of repairing a drainage problem on private property. As you may also recall, the city does not do maintenance of stormwater devices on private property. And this program, which we call the 70/30 program, is the city's only activity where we do work on private property or assist in work on private property. In this situation, there is a storm drainage line that was installed at some point underneath the house, or the house was built over the top of the storm drainage line, and there is a problem that has obviously developed. The project would relocate that storm drainage line, as you see on the photograph that's attached to this item, from the red alignment to the green alignment. They have to answer any questions.
Just briefly, Mr. Turner, is there anything unusual with regard to this project? It's a fairly routine 70/30 project, and keeping with the standard policy?
That is correct.
Thank you. Mr. Larson?
Well, obviously, I brought this up before, and I'm still grappling with the whole concept. Would this property owner have the right to just cut this line and discontinue water flowing underneath his house from the storm drain that's on the city right away? Would that be an option to him to simply say, this line is failing, and I'm going to cut it at my property line and discontinue it?
I'll look to legal for confirmation, but it's my understanding they would not have that legal right.
That's my understanding.
Do we have a formal easement on this line? We have nothing.
Correct. No.
So we have
There's a general duty obligation to allow for the natural flow of the drainage way or the established flow of the drainage way, which is, I understand it, is what would prevent a person from doing what you have described, Councilman.
There's some sort of law that says the city has the right to run water downhill.
Again, I'll look to the attorneys, but it's more about what the court opinions have been about citizens' obligations.
Right. I mean, Greg has generally described it in terms of not interfering with the natural water when things are constructed.
So I'm really curious about, so this line's going to get replaced. It runs underneath a house, and it's failing, and it was obviously there before the house was built, and so now it needs to be replaced. The city is going to pay 70% of this, right?
Correct.
And yet we're not assuming responsibility for the line.
Also correct.
And so any problems that happen later on, are we putting in a new storm drain at the street?
We'll be responsible for the portion that parallels Grace and stays in the right-of-way. Once it leaves the right-of-way and onto private property, then we don't.
So the section on Grace would be our responsibility?
That is correct.
Okay. But once it goes onto private property, we're back where we started in this discussion.
Yes.
A mystery to me. All right.
Just in terms of long-term suggestion, the state law is pretty well established as a matter of common law, a matter of court application of statutory and other previous court decisions regarding the obligation of property owners to let the natural flow of the water continue across their property. It's come up in a number of cases over the decades. Excuse me, local municipalities are well established that we do not have to assume obligation for maintaining non-publicly created and funded stormwater conveyances across private property. A city may choose to do that. A city may also choose to voluntarily enter into programs like this where we share responsibility for the capital cost with a private owner under certain circumstances. We've done a lot of discussion over the years about this, and I know it's a lot to pick up on coming onto a committee. I'd recommend a sort of a background or
I'm getting. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I am getting the tenor of all of this, and obviously I'm not going to keep beating this dead horse too much, but it does strike me as an individual property owner has little recourse at this point to respond to these kinds of demands by the city and on situations that in fact really are not his making or doing, and the city has now imposed a responsibility to him. And not only that, the city is refusing to take ultimate responsibility for the lines that are ultimately put in. I'm not questioning the right to cross property. I'm not questioning the right of the city to install water that will run downhill. I am questioning, however, the responsibility then of the property owner, not to give an easement, but then to incur the cost to deal with city runoff water. That's the problem that I'm having with this whole system, and I don't think I can correct it individually. But I've got to say that as a property owner who, might be dealing with this, this is going to be a cost that really is, I think, a cost that the city's stormwater system should be absorbing.
And actually, just to correct the record for anybody watching, the city has not imposed an obligation on this property owner or other property owners. This is state law that has acted to impose that obligation, over which the city has no control. And the city did not, it's my understanding, certainly in the normal course of events, the city would not have approached this property owner and instructing him to fix the problem underneath his property. It would be the normal course of events for the property owner to approach the city for financial assistance. Is that what happened in this case?
Correct. The property owner is Mr. Flynn, and he approached the city for assistance. And so, under your voluntary 70/30 program, a property owner can approach the city for participation in the cost of a repair that they wish to have made on their property.
Further questions? Comments? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. If there's no further discussion, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? That's approved.
They got to fix it.
Thank you very much. Let's go now to the general agenda items, please.
Item G1, update on map for Scythe.
Thank you very much. And is this Mr. Rowe? You'll step up, and for folks listening, if you'll introduce yourself and your position, please.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Joseph Sloop. I'm the Geographic Information Officer for Map for Scythe. We are a city-county Geographic Information Office.
Good evening, and thank you.
So per our interlocal agreement, one of the things we do is do an annual update of kind of activities and things that have been going on within our department. So this is why I'm here this evening, to go ahead and give you that update for this fiscal year. So quickly, I just want to jump right into it. One thing we do, we hold monthly GIS steering committee meetings. That committee is made up of Tom Koreska, Paul Norby, John Burgess, the tax assessor collector, and Gary Kuntz, who is the CTO for the county. So we have representatives from IT and planning and the tax assessor's office. The whole purpose of this committee is to look at kind of high-level policies that we could roll out that would benefit all city and county departments in regards to geospatial data. And one I listed, for example, was a metadata policy. Documenting your data that you create, documenting how you create it, when you create it, and those kind of things. Also, the committee also looks at large-scale projects that should go on between the city and county. One of those is the addressing project, and I think in your package you have a report about the addressing project that we've been working on. I'll touch a little bit more on that later in the presentation. We also hold bi-monthly GIS user group meetings. It's an opportunity for staff to get together and just talk about the different GIS projects going on, any kind of issues, and also just talk about the new technology coming out. This has been very beneficial so far, because lots of times we'll be talking and one department will say, yeah, I'm getting ready to do this type of project. No one's, well, we're doing similar, so then all of a sudden we can pair up and piggyback off one another and use our resources more efficiently. And this is actually open to all the local governments here in Forsyth County. We have some folks from Louisville and Rural Hall and some other places who attended also here again just to learn more about GIS technologies. Just want to highlight just a couple projects that we're currently working on. The two I'm showing here, we are actually working with the IS department, and so these two applications will be rolling out within the next couple weeks. One is Winston-Salem Transit Authority stop location and collection application. So we're working with Winston-Salem DOT and sanitation. This is one of those times, like I was saying, where two different departments were going to pretty much do a similar project, and we said we can do it together, kill, two birds with one stone, and that's what we're doing. So basically collecting all the stop locations and at the same time looking at any kind of trash cans or any other things that are located nearby and creating an inventory of that. The other one is for property and facility maintenance, and this is the asset collector. And so I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of the City Works project and everything going on. So this ties right back into City Works. And so they have 18 different asset types they'll be collecting. It's nice. It's using an iPad. They can go out and very quickly enter all the information. There's a lot of drop downs. We keep it very simple, very efficient, and it's live update as they're doing it. So again, that ties back into the City Works. We just finished up working with sanitation. They needed an internal service lookup application, and so we worked with them and created this to kind of show trash pickup, cart on demand pickup, and all these other things so the managers can get on and quickly look and see where things need to happen and people need to go. Another thing I suppose is kind of hard to see. This is kind of getting into the really nerdy world of what we do. But we have set up, both at the city and county, a system monitoring tool. So now we can monitor all GIS activity, how long the data takes to be downloaded, if people are running out of GIS license, all kinds of things. We can keep an eye on that. And too, that's beneficial in terms of budget time. If we need to come to something, we actually have hard numbers justifying or not justifying what we're asking for. And here again, we run these reports weekly, and they both go to both IT departments weekly. A brand new project we've been finishing up. We've been working with the Cooperative Extension and helping them with their urban agriculture project. And so basically what this map does is allows people to put in an address, zoom into that address, and see potentially how much land they have to be able to do a garden on their property. Linked to it is a yield sheet, so if you want to plant corn, you have 500 square feet, okay, what's the yield going to be? And it ties back into the cooperative extension. We were also part of working on the Star Communities project, and so we were very excited. City of Winston received that, and so we worked on a lot of maps and different custom reports to help with that project. Shifting gears a little bit, so we are in charge of doing all city-county addressing also. And we've been working on a big addressing project, trying to clean up the addresses. So we've completed our master address repository. So now we have an official data set of all addresses. And that's available for everybody. And phase 3 is actually going to be integration to more systems than what we have now. One interesting thing we've done is we purchased, we call it the RGA tool, which allows our addressing team to be able to edit into 2 different databases at the same time. Whereas historically you had to edit in one database and then go to another database to edit. And so there was a little bit of room for human error. So we've been able to cut that out and eliminate that and streamline this process with this tool. We just updated all the interlocal agreements with all the municipalities about addressing. Historically, it was under the City County Planning Department, so we had to go back and do all the interlocal agreements to name us as the authoritative department for doing that. Another thing is, I've challenged the addressing team to be out in the field more. We have the technology. So now, if somebody says, hey, these addresses, we're not sure if they're right, we send them out in the field. They can edit out in the field, real time, and here again, all that information ties back into the city works and permitting. Just really quickly, just wanted to show kind of the anomalies as we were doing the cleanup. City of Winston did really well. As you can see, we broke the City of Winston into two areas, so anomalies would be misspellings, evens on odd sides of the road, those kind of things, and so we've had to go back in and clean some of that stuff up. But your anomaly percentages were great, very low, so good job. Phase 3 addressing is, like I said, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the integration of this nice data set that we have into our systems in-house. So we've identified 4 major systems we want to take care of first. First is the tax system. Second is the CSR, the Mobile 311 reporting. CityWorks, Kayenta, and then, as you can see, I've highlighted the CityWorks and the County and City Emergency Services. They are already integrated into this. And I want to emphasize that all our emergency responders have already been integrated. It's already in their CADs, and they're using the correct, most accurate data that we have. On the horizon, some future projects. Obviously, Phase 3 will begin beginning of the new fiscal year. We have a centralized GIS data repository, and we just started today meeting with all department heads from the city and county, talk about the needs and to create an inventory of all GIS data that is created, maintained, both between the city and county. The whole purpose of this is we're going to put the final products up into a database that everybody can get to. So if anybody's working on a project, they don't have to make 10 different phone calls. They can go grab the data they need and complete their project in a timely manner. From that, any data that is publicly available, we have an open data portal. It's a geospatial open data portal. It's different from the city one. This one's specific to GIS data, in which anybody can come and download those data sets free of charge and just get what they need. So we're going to be rolling that out as soon as we get more data populated. The other thing is we're working with Recreation and Parks to create what we call story maps to kind of show all the different parks that the city has, and talk about the amenities, link it to different videos, websites, and things like that, so we're going to work with them. Other thing is we're the primary contact for the Census Luca project. That's the addressing project where they count all the residential addresses, and obviously that gets tied back to dollars and some other things. Very important. And then we always have a GIS day. And there, believe it or not, there really is an International GIS Day that's recognized, third week in November. And historically, we've partnered with Winston-Salem State University. And what we do, we get a lot of the professionals to come and show the students what we do in local government, and hopefully inspire them to come into local government to work and to do GIS. And that's all I have for my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Question?
Great job.
Mr. McIntosh?
Probably shouldn't. I got a bunch of questions we should probably get together, but one thing the manager and I had talked about is, first of all, how do you make changes and update the addressing system as we go forward? What are the mechanisms that take into account new additions to, or I don't know how many changes we get, but there are definitely going to be additions to the system.
Yes. So all addresses will come into the addressing team from MapperSite. So we work very closely with planning. So we sit on their plan review. So if the plat comes in for subdivisions or anything like that, we're with them. We're part of that, and we go ahead and assign the addresses and everything like that. And as we do that, we then load it. Like I was mentioning, that tool that we have, as we put it in the GIS, it's also entering it into the master address repository, the MAR, at the same time. So we have in place a policy manual to guide how we do addressing, the standards associated with addressing. And that standard gets reviewed every year by the Addressing Technical Committee, which is made up of different parties from the city and county and emergency services. And so, to answer your question, the majority of the addresses are coming through some sort of development. And so usually they come into inspections, and you know, sometimes the addresses are there, and if they're not there, that's when the addressing technician just calls us up, and we put it in on the fly right then so that they can pull their permit and get on with their day.
I've got some other questions that are probably way too geeky, so I'm probably going to set up a meeting with you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be happy. I'd be happy
Real-
to.
Thanks.
Anybody else? No, thanks very much.
Great
Love
job.
the GIS.
Thank you.
Love those maps. Okay, let's move on to item G2, please.
Item G2, update on WISTA's services.
Okay. And this was emailed to you earlier, and you've got the hard copy handout at your places here. And I believe that Mr. Barnes is going to be presenting, assisted by staff. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, good.
Mr. Chairman, a clarification of a question you asked me earlier. When we get to the trips, it is individual segments. So if you did a transfer, that's 2 separate trips.
All right, that's noteworthy, and I'll get to that. Thank you very much. Appreciate you following up on that. Mr. Barnes.
Okay, Chairman Bessie, I have that information with respect to the public meetings for Trans-Aid. There will be a meeting on April 17th at 9:30 a.m. at the Anderson Community Center. That's a Monday. Additionally, there will be 2 meetings at the Transportation Center on the 24th, one at 9 a.m. and one at 4 p.m., and that's also a Monday.
Thank you. So anyone who is looking for additional public comment opportunities on the proposed changes in the Trans-Aid fee structure, and who hasn't had an opportunity to comment on that yet, please do come out. We want your input into the process, and we will make it a point to see that everyone has an opportunity to review the compiled comments and take those into account as the budget process moves forward this year. Now, this particular agenda item, the update on WISTA services, is particularly focused on the changes to the fixed route system that were implemented this year, the refinements that have already been made, what they did in response to concerns and problems that arose, and further recommendations for changes that the council can consider for, well, that'll be part of your report.
Yes, sir. As the council is aware, new routes went into effect on January 2nd. The route configuration was different from the previous route configuration in that it incorporated additional circulators and crosstown routes and night service. one of the directives from this body was to come back with a comprehensive report and cover any modifications that might be addressed. And what we also plan to do is to cover the modifications we have made to date. We have presented those to this committee previously, but we'll summarize those again. The agenda for this meeting will be an overview of the system, which we just did, and performance and performance indicators and public comments, modifications to date, and proposed modifications. I want to start off with a comparison between the ridership in 2016 and ridership in 2017, as you can see there, as it's indicated. One of the things that we mentioned prior to putting these new routes into effect is that we expected a decrease in ridership as a result of putting in this new route configuration. That's standard in the industry, and I remember Tanika and I attended a conference in Atlanta. Jacksonville did exactly the same thing that we did, and they talked about the ridership stats. And the long-range plan is to come into parity with at least the 2016 stats and surpass them. But they said it was, I think, about a year and a half before they reached parity. But the idea is, again, to improve the system and adjust to the travel patterns that came as a result of the consultant study.
I made, Mr. Barnes, just because the numbers are noteworthy here. One of the design goals of the modifications was to make it possible for folks to get more frequently to their destination without having to use the transfer. It's my understanding
that was the reason for the crosstown routes in the circulators.
It's my understanding that the way you count rider numbers is that each segment of a trip by someone who uses the transfer counts as a rider.
That's true.
In the number. So I think at some future point, I think it would be useful for us to have it broken out how many transfers we had previously versus what we're experiencing now, so that we can get a rough idea of how much of the change in raw numbers is attributable to efficiency as opposed to confusion.
We should be able to do that easily.
Thank you.
Okay. Going to the next slide, as you can see, with the 2017 numbers, we are realizing an increase from January to February 7% and from February to March 2%. So what we predicted would happen is happening. Next is your performance data. What we have here is ridership by each route. You'll see Route 87 there is transports the highest number of people, followed by Route 83, and I mentioned those two routes because it will become significant later. Here's just a comparative graph of the routes. Again, you'll see Route 87 has the highest ridership, and followed by Route 83. But this indicator is a productivity indicator, and that you'll see the routes there, and that PPH is passengers per hour and passengers per mile. And what you see is that Route 83 has 30.55 passengers per hour, where Route 87 has 29.47. But Route 87 has the highest, transports the highest numbers of people. The difference is that Route 87 has two buses on it. So bang for the buck, your return on investment is best with Route 83. So those are significant figures, and we use those in the industry to gauge the productivity of routes.
But in terms of where the passenger demand is, they're all numbers that indicate that 87 is the top.
In terms of the number of people that ride Route 87, Route 87 has two buses on it. Route 83 has one.
Oh, but it has
So-
two buses because there's so many people that need the service. One bus isn't enough, right?
Right, exactly, exactly.
Pardon me, please go ahead.
Okay. These are the public comments, and they're listed by type. In total, there were 473 comments, and we do have a document that's available that lists each individual comment. They were by bus route modification and bus sign stop modification and specific inquiries in general. The bus route modification usually requests to change the routes to go a different way. Bus sign stop modification is to put basically to put a bus stop somewhere. This may interest you. These are the comments we received by ward. Now you see there are 267 comments, and that is because specific inquiries and general comments were excluded from this particular matrix. Again, you have the concentration of concerns on the routes that were commented on most frequently, and the concentration of concerns, and on the right side, additional notes with respect to that individual route. As you can see, most of the requests are for night service and weekend service. We had, as I mentioned before, modifications to date. This committee authorized us to make minor modifications, and we have done that and presented them to you already. The factors that were considered in making those decisions was, of course, the amount of public comment and our ability to make the changes quickly, and also, finally, the cost of the modifications. There were 3 basic modification dates, 2 in January and 1 in March. You also have the reasons that are listed for the modifications for the routes where we made modifications, and the factors that were considered in making those decisions. It's just a list of the modifications that we have made to date, and the detail associated with them with respect to the change in routing. Now, these modifications were minor because they were inexpensive, really. Basically, the changes involved a change in the route and the mileage, which is a lower cost factor. Had we increased the amount of time or the hours on the respective route, you would have more expensive considerations. So the changes that we made were minor. Next, we'll go into the proposed modifications and the factors that we considered. Again, the amount of public comment, the available service, the impact of the changes, the duplication, if there's duplication, what would be the effect of the elimination, and our ability, again, to make the changes quickly, and most of all, the cost of the modifications. Now, these are the proposed modifications, and let me explain how this works. The first column, of course, is the routes, and we commented on night service, Saturday service, and Sunday service. We left weekday service out because, of course, all the routes run on weekday. The shaded area indicates routes where we are currently providing service. So, for instance, on Route 81, we have night service and Saturday service in effect now. On Route 80, that is a proposal. So Route 80, we're proposing night service, Saturday service, and Sunday service. Now, if you go to Route 100, you'll see a negative sign there. That's because staff is proposing the elimination of Route 100. Route 100 runs from, I want to say Davis Garage, but it's not Davis Garage anymore, Union Station, over to Forsyth. That is has very low productivity. and so we are proposing the elimination of that route. Your next slide shows the costs associated with putting that service into effect. Now, if you look at the night columns or any of the columns, really, you'll see that the dollar amounts are similar. The only difference in the service from one route to another involves the mileage. The hours will all be the same. We're looking at a total of, if we were to put everything in effect, $1,012,537. And if we eliminated Route 100, we would have a savings of $216,000, which would leave your net total cost at $796,537.
Questions about the presentation? Got plenty of discussion to go, but first questions about, yes, Mr. Larson.
I'm looking at the ridership numbers. And
Yes.
There's been some explanation about expectations in the next 6 months. I think the six-month period is what we were initially forecasting for this thing to sort of level out. Is that?
After 6 months, I doubt it will reach parity after 6 months. I would say it would be at least a year. That was Jacksonville's experience. That's why I referenced that.
When do we expect to see our numbers to be fairly consistent, realizing we're implementing this new program for a year?
I would say a year it is.
The reason I'm sort of asking this, we're looking at, the two sheets where you talk about then percentages of increase, when you're showing an increase in January, February, March, where you go back to 2016 and we're seeing seasonal increase anyway.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what we're really dealing with here as far as ridership goes. I understand we're in transition, but I'm trying to understand also, considering the amount of money we're putting into this, what our prospects are of cost per rider value ratios, sort of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, theoretically, we're adding money, we're adding time, we're adding accessibility. And of course, what I'm asking for is value added as well as ridership.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to understand when we might begin to think that would be an appropriate index for us to use.
You're asking for a specific date?
I'm asking for a general time period, if in November, December, next year.
Okay, year and a half.
Do you think a year and a half would do that?
Yes.
The proposals that are being made for the additional services that are being requested, this extra $1 million that's being asked for, do we have any estimates of what that would do to ridership?
Well,
I mean,
speculate-
area service, number of people. These bus routes already exist, so you got a certain ridership on those bus routes, right?
Right. But it would be speculation. I could give you a logical formula for that based on what our average ridership is now per hour, per mile, and say that that's probably what will happen if we expand those. But that would be speculation.
Right.
Because unless we have a survey, a very detailed survey, where we could know what the market was, I couldn't tell you exactly what would happen.
Because where I'm going with all this discussion in part is, we know that the city is perhaps anyway underfunding our public transportation system compared to other municipalities. We're making some attempts to upgrade the service and accessibility for our populations that it's serving. What I don't have is a comparison really of the value, the cost per rider based on the amount of money we're investing in all of this. And as we invest more money, is our ridership value going to go up or down? Are we getting more customers? What is it that we're gauging against here? If we're using Durham as an example, I don't know what their cost or value per rider is. I don't know if we're comparing apples and apples when we say, Durham's throwing in 16 million and we're throwing in 8 or whatever it is that we're doing here. And as we think about adding more money, what I'm trying to figure out is, what are we really judging ourselves against as we try to value engineer this thing?
Okay.
That's the questions I'm groping with right now, particularly as we think about adding another $1 million to the project, which is what I'm hearing tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can access that information from other transit systems. The cost provider would be easy to calculate for our current
I would
systems.
appreciate that. And could I, as an on-personal note, could I get from you guys exactly what's going on in the South Ward as far as these bus routes go? I see I've got so many complaints, 77 complaints. You've handled them all. I know I've sent them to you, so I assume they're satisfied. But if I could get a little better understanding of what these routes are that specifically serve the South Ward, that would be helpful for me.
Okay, all the comments are detailed and sorted for you, every last one of them. So we'll get you that information.
In addition to the cost per rider data, I'd be interested in your extent. How do I put this? How long does it take somebody to get to their destination?
Get you their destination on average?
Yeah.
Depends on where they are. If you're going from one end of the system and you're taking two routes, it would be a 30-minute drive into the transportation center, maybe a 7-8 minute layover, and then 30 minutes to get to
You mean
the
for us
other
to
end.
bring that data back?
Yes, and that's exactly the kind of information that's relevant, is how many people are, instead of having to take, say, a 45-minute ride from the start of, a route to the transportation center, or wait 8 minutes there, then take another 45 minutes out. And the theory of the redesign in part was that somebody could take a circulator in their area or a cross-town route and get there in 30 minutes. It would be useful if at some point we can put together some statistics and compare and see if we're actually producing faster service for passengers. That's harder to do than raw costs per rider, so I don't know how long it would take to produce that, but it would be another performance data.
It's going to be tied into the non-transfer number that you're asking for earlier.
Yes. And also, this is just a general information request. In your summary of sort of the raw numbers on comments, bus route modifications, you noted that 13 of the comments were either not recommended or not considered. I'd be interested in a sort of a listing of the ones that were not recommended, so that we can get an idea of what was asked for that you didn't think we could reasonably accommodate where it was, and sort of just for comparison's sake. Same under the bus stop sign modifications, please. At your convenience. I don't need this tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you. Other sort of general background or inquiries about any of the specific data? Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barnes, I didn't really want to have dialogue other than the fact just to say thank you and the staff for making the adjustments to the routes in the southeastern portion of the city. When this rollout originally came out, I didn't get a whole lot of feedback from the constituents in the area. But based on the numbers that I see, it looks like sort of the southeastern routes had sort of the highest level of satisfaction. There were some adjustments that were recommended. It looks like we've gone out and made those changes. I'm looking forward to sort of the inclusion of night, Saturday, and Sunday service. But other than that, I think people are generally satisfied. As of late, we've had some citizens and residents to step up and make some inquiries around that. But other than that, I think we've done a good job, and I appreciate what you and the staff have done to make those adjustments.
I appreciate you saying that, Councilman, but I want to mention the staff because I didn't put this together by myself.
I was so careful to include the staff.
There was a lot of input, and they've done a lot of work over the last couple of years. So.
Yeah, and
Continue to do a lot of work.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor has made an important point. Staff has worked hard on the modifications, on getting the adjustments to the system that we knew we'd need to do, and you've worked hard to do it on an expedited basis, and we appreciate it. And on behalf of our constituents, we appreciate it. What we've got, if there are no more specific inquiries, what we've got here, we have a set of recommendations and a price tag. This committee doesn't have the authority to make the changes unless the council is willing to pay for them. What we can do is indicate what we would like to recommend to the council. We can do that today, we can start today, and we can continue discussion in May. After that, we're out of time. And May's late in the process, so what I would suggest is that we ask staff to report to the budget discussions the package of recommendations that you have put together to respond, along with the price tag, and put that into the discussion mix, and we can advocate for the entire package, for elements of the package, or not, as we choose individually. If the committee wishes to make a committee recommendation on this, we can discuss that today as well. Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bessie. Looking at the proposed recommendations coming from staff, again, thanks, Winston and staff, for everything you guys have been doing for the past couple of years. I know it has not been easy, and I know we can be difficult, I know. But thank you. Thank you very much for being so patient with us and the citizens and getting it done. Vice Chair of Finance, I would rather see your committee give us your suggestions of good, better, best. You need to prioritize, because I'm just going to say it. We don't have a magic wand this year. We're city manager is up to a tall task this year, unlike in 2009 and 2010. So I think it's best that your committee brings to us what you recommend, that if you can get this is the one we want the most, because I don't see all of it happening. And we know it's going to be a process as we move forward, as we implement and bring in and still change. But the proposed suggestions, I don't think we'll get them all. So looking for your committee to help us make that decision.
Hear that? Now, the recommended budget from the city manager already includes, as I understand it, a 1 cent tax rate adjustment in order to pay for what we've already committed to provide. Do we know what additional adjustment would have to be made if the entire package of recommendations were to be approved?
Probably another half cent.
Another half cent?
Yeah. Is that right, Ben? Yeah.
So the presentation of options in front of the budget discussion included a 1 cent and a 1.5 cent adjustment, and what that would do to the transit fund long term. I would suggest to the committee that we recommend that information be provided to the budget discussions. If we were to go to 1.5 instead of 1, and were to include the package of recommendations, what would the long-term outlook for the transit fund be on a year-to-year basis? I assume that we can crunch those.
Chairman Bessie, we've updated the outlook to reflect the cost of these particular recommendations. And we have that on the Elmo right now, if that would be
yes, please.
Helpful.
Milliseconds in the future.
Good evening, Chairman Bessie, members of the City Council.
Good evening.
Per management's request, after Budget Office was provided with a list of the proposed modifications, we updated the outlook with the 3 scenarios that were presented to the Committee of the Whole last Monday evening. The blue line is with no change to the tax rate allocated toward WISTA. The green is a 1 cent increase above the current projection for revenue neutral. And then the top, which is purple, a little tough to see on the monitor, that's a 1.5 cent increase above current projections for revenue neutral. That's the full about $800,000 additional package.
Okay. I'd also suggest. Yes.
I'm going to make a suggestion, Chairman. Perhaps Mr. Turner and I, we could meet with each council member individually to look at the different routes and what wards and what areas they serve, and then do a little polling about what the priorities are as we prepare the budget.
And as a part of that, I think it would be useful to take the citizen input that we had during the comments and match those to modifications so that we can have at least some data on which to base an analysis of what are the top priorities. I'm personally prepared to recommend a 1.5 instead of a 1 and inclusion of the entire package of improvements. Don't know if anyone else wants to go there, but we can certainly point to a process by which we arrive at that conclusion. We don't have to have a committee recommendation on that point today. But in the discussion, I'm going to very seriously consider, as an advocate for the users of the system generally, supporting a recommendation to do that. Yes, Mr. Taylor.
I wanted to get some clarity, Mr. Chairman, on the thought of the recommended package. I'm not quite sure what that means. Are we talking about the proposed modifications that we see before us on pages 17 and 18?
Yes.
And that does or does not include adjustments to fixed route system and the Trans 8 system?
This does not address the Trans 8 changes at all.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that.
This is fixed route only.
Thank you.
The significant changes to the Trans 8 system, honestly, are already in progress pursuant to findings and of what our obligations are under federal funding rules and federal law, and what we have agreed to undertake in terms of improvements. So that's, at least at this point, that's already fixed costs into the system. Mr. Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm reluctant to encumber next year's budget with a recommendation tonight of full funding. However, I do think there's value in all of this study that's been done, and I commend staff for the time spent, in particularly trying to value out the various costs of these routes. I would like to go back to my basic question of being able to maybe prioritize all of these in the sense of the complaints that we've received, the citizen input that is sort of coming into these areas, which routes are likely to have the best ridership. So if we have to make some choices, we can try. I think ideally we would do them all. We may not be able to do them all next year. But I would like, if we're going to start trying to value engineer this, I'd like to have some standard to work off of. So if we can begin to categorize these based on areas of service, the idea of potential ridership and cost, and the value then to that based on that number we talked about earlier, I think that would be a good place for us to start, and I think you can be doing that anyway. So if we could have that and bring that then to the finance budget process, we will be able to sort of weave this thing in. But to commit today for an additional half-cent increase is not something I'm prepared to do.
Yeah, and actually, I wouldn't expect the committee to be prepared to commit to that. I just simply was being candid with you about what I'm personally considering recommending. One of the difficulties, one of the challenges that we have here is there are a number of moving parts, and ranking the individual changes would require applying some value judgment to how do you weigh the differing factors, like the question of availability of service within a certain geographic residence for, say, Saturday or Sunday. Number of individuals on that route, and so a guesstimate of how many additional people would be served by particular expansion. You're going to get into geographic issues of which areas do you serve if you pick and choose. There are a number of very legitimate factors that can be taken into account, and at some point we're going to have to make a judgment call. If we go on the basis of, we take recommendations A, D, and F, and we say, well, maybe next year for recommendations B, C, and D. That's making these choices is part of our job.
Part of our job.
Yes.
But we can look and see where the complaints are. We can see where the comments have been, and what wards particularly feel underserved or have had problems. And I think we can start with those and see where the supplemental service is going to help address some of that.
Very good. Mr. Rackett.
Yeah, I'd like to see, there were 90-some comments in the Northwest Ward. I'd like to get a flavor of what those actually were. We redid the entire bus system. It was a $500,000 bump. And we're talking about spending an additional $1 million. To me, I got to see more value than what I've shown in this report to spend that kind of money.
Yeah. I know that one of the chief feedback points that we got during the comments after the implementation was made is that that folks on certain routes didn't realize that in the configuration they were going to lose, say, Sunday service to their area. I believe that was one of the chief comments that Mr. Taylor was getting from constituents.
Then I'm not real happy with that $500,000 we spent first time around.
I hear you. And that I suspect, although I haven't had it broken down, I suspect that that's going to be one of the comments heard from part of my area as well. There were areas that were served by Sunday service when we implemented Sunday service that are no longer served without the change.
So, Mr. Chairman, as a matter of record, it's 800,000, not $1 million, just so we're clear about who's quibbling over 200,000. And it will be interesting to hear what the riders on Route 100 have to say about this. But, we'll see how all that shakes out.
Yeah, and I'll note just for interest that 100 runs from the southwest ward to the east ward in the crosstown route. But if you also look at the ridership numbers, it's one of two that have a total ridership per month of less than 1,000 riders. Really off the bottom of the scale in terms of this one just didn't fly. That dog didn't hunt. So, it was a good idea at the time. Maybe in a couple of years, people might be ready to go back to it. I would be interested in a look at why 110 was not given the same heat vote as 100. Yes.
If you're referring to Route 110,
yes,
that is the route that goes over to the city garage and just runs part of the day. It runs in the morning for a few hours and in the evening for a few hours. So I just want to make that clarification.
What does it serve?
The city facility. It goes from downtown to the city facility off of Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And it just runs a few hours in the morning.
It's basically for city and city staff.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha. All right. Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so what we have with some general data requests that staff will be working to get back to us on, and the ones that are directly relevant to this year's budget consideration have priority, please. And then, first suggestion to the city manager, a review with individual council members of changes that would impact their service areas, our wards, and how those track with the comments and complaints that we were getting. Yes, Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My last comment is, I want to make myself clear for the record. I like to consider myself to be a reasonable man, and very seldomly do I draw a line in the sand and say I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do that, especially when it comes to legislation. I think it's important that we compromise, but I don't believe that I can compromise on a couple of things. I will not support, and I did not support, any increases to fares for the fixed route system and for the Trans-8 system. I do believe that these are our most vulnerable citizens, and at this point in time, based on the rollout, I just cannot support that. However, I do like your thoughts about passing forward an idea for a 1.5 cent increase to allow the community to sort of share the responsibility of caring for our most vulnerable citizens. But I will not individually support any rate increases to Trans-8 or fixed route.
Other comments generally? Now, the floor is open for motions if somebody wants to make one, but I don't sense a consensus on the committee at this point. I'm not asking for a particular motion. If I heard a consensus from any particular, I would ask for a motion.
Because I'm where I am. I'd be happy to make the motion, but if we want to just relax, get more information, and make a decision at a later date, that's fine. But I don't think I'll be moved on this.
Okay, let me add. Actually, the question for the committee wasn't really fair. The question.
I'm talking about the 1.5 cent increase.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, right. I'm prepared to do that.
Well, we've got 3 of our committee members here today.
I can be patient.
Let me circle back to one point. Is there any objection to asking that the information be provided to the Finance Committee for inclusion in the budget discussion?
No objection here.
So by consensus, the committee asks that information that was prepared regarding what 1.5 would permit to be responsibly funded going forward be provided as information to the Finance Committee discussion. I think that the information is going to be available for the discussion and can be informed by the survey in terms of presenting collective recommendations in effect to the Finance Committee. I haven't made any Sherman-esque statements about my how I'll come down. I suggested where I'm leaning. I hear Mr. Taylor leaning the same direction, but Mr. Larson not necessarily, and I'm not sure where Mr. Montgomery stands on this. So I'm not going to request a motion on that particular point.
Fair enough.
Any other discussion on this topic? Excuse me. Again, I think staff have done exactly what we asked you to do in a very compressed time frame. You've analyzed the comments and complaints. You have put forward together a couple of packages of changes that you were able to implement for modest financial impact, and you presented to us a list of recommendations that you thought could responsibly be made and what they would cost. And at this point, then, we have to determine as a full council what we're willing to pay for and how we're prepared to pay for it. Excuse me. Other comments or information, questions, or research on this point?
Nothing further.
All right. Then we do have one more agenda item on today's agenda, please. G3.
Item G3, presentation on 2017 through 2021 strategic plan.
Good evening, Chairman Bessie, members of the committee and council.
Good evening.
We have, last Monday, the Committee of the Whole received a presentation on the draft strategic plan. There were 3 pieces of that presentation. One did a recap of the process that got us to where we are with the draft strategic plan. We looked at the plan at a very high level of detail in terms of the action items and how they were housed within the strategic focus areas. And then we briefly discussed next steps. Among those first next steps was to receive feedback from the committees and mayor and city council. We are here to take that feedback from the committee if discussion needs to happen on individual action items. I will say that, as you all know, other committees have deferred also to provide individual feedback in person or via email to the manager, Mr. Rauer, to myself. So at the pleasure of the committee, if there are particular action items and sections that you would like to discuss, please feel free to do so, and we'll record that information.
My watch.
Ah.
I think, yeah.
Sorry.
Otherwise,
Thank you.
I think
Take no man.
we're more than happy to take any feedback that you have on
as
the
on
action.
other occasions, I think we ought to bring it to you individually. We can do that.
Other questions today, comments?
None at this time.
Thank you very much, and I agree. I think individual comments and feedback are appropriate at this point. Before I ask the usual question of Mr. Turner, what do we have lined up for May, our May meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of anything special. Is there a desire to do something or not do something at that meeting?
I'd like to put this item on for discussion again at that point. We're arranging to make the information available to the Finance Committee right
You mean the
away.
WISTA item?
Yes, the WISTA.
You had already indicated that you were going to discuss it at the budget deliberation process that the committee doesn't normally go through, but the Public Safety Committee goes through. You're right.
And so, but.
So yes, we could definitely bring back the WISTA item for June, or for May. There wouldn't be anything time critical, I can tell you that right now.
Okay. All right, good. Then let's bring the WISTA fixed route review back to committee discussion in May. I'm going to confer with my colleagues and see if we want to set up a public comment opportunity as well at that meeting. We may end up with a committee recommendation, either by consensus or by majority. Didn't want to ask for it today with limited discussion opportunity. But we may have further feedback based on individual polling at that point in terms of prioritization, or we may have a committee majority on how to deal with the package. Anything else that you'd like to see on the May agenda? If it ends up that we have a lot of flexibility, we may want to consider, in addition to the fixed route changes, having a summary presentation on the Trans-8 comments. Again, this would be at the pleasure of the committee. Give me your feedback after the meeting, if you would, whether we want to incorporate a public comment period on that section as well.
That graph that showed the 1.5 increase, was that graph including Trans-8?
Mm-hmm.
And did that include, was that also, did that incorporate the 50-cent increase or not?
The graph does include Trans-8 expenses and revenues. Councilmember Larson, the proposed Trans-8 fare increase is not incorporated into that.
So there's no reflection of any fare increases at all in that graph?
Not at this time.
But it does include Trans-8. Thank you.
Let me ask, I had this information, I don't have it memorized. What would be the total projected revenue impact on an annual basis from the full increase that has been sent out for comment?
For Trans-8, rescinding the Medicaid exemption and going to a $1 fare would generate around $90,000 per year in, I guess you call it fare box revenue for Trans-8 services.
So it's there's not a huge hit on the total. Frankly, I anticipate of more significance to the budget is how those changes might affect future changes in demand. What we've been experiencing over the past several years is a frankly unsustainable rate of increase in demand for Trans-8 service. And one of the questions has been, how do we address that? We are committed to and have already budgeted very substantial cost increases to provide very substantial improvement in service quality delivery in transit. If we were to continue the arc exponentially of increasing demand, we would be hit with the same kind of increase in service costs, likely in another 2 or 3 years. So the question in part becomes, do we consider that to be a sustainable approach over the long run for our system-wide expenses? If not, is there a way to address it? So that's the picture. The actual impact on the budget from the revenue generated by the changes is less significant than its potential impact on future demand increases. I think it was Mr. Clark that indicated when you have it free good, then there is no cost signal to an indefinite increase in demand. And we do see some potential unintended perverse impact of folks who could take the fixed route system, switching over and taking Transat instead, because to take the fixed route to pay $1, they take Transat to pay nothing. And the cost to the system is several times larger per ride on Transat than on the fixed route system. Anyway, factors for long-term consideration. Other requests on either meeting items for the future or information feedback on this issue? Okay. Mr. Curry, anything else today?
Nope.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Today we are adjourned.
Thank you.